The letter came on a Tuesday morning in May, sealed with wax and delivered by a rider who looked like he'd come straight from hell. I was out mending fence when my housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, walked across the field with the envelope in her hand, her face wearing that expression women get when they know bad news is coming, but they're too polite to say it outright. My name is Thomas Blackwell, and I'm 45 years old. I own the Blackwell Ranch, or I did before this letter arrived. The ranch sprawls across 15,000 acres of Montana territory, some of the best grazing land in the state. I'd built it from nothing, starting with 200 cattle and a dream 15 years ago. Now I had 10,000 head, the finest horses in 3 territories, and a reputation as one of the most successful ranchers west of the Mississippi. But I was also cursed. That's what people said anyway. Thomas Blackwell had everything except the one thing that mattered, a wife. Not that I hadn't tried. I'd courted 3 women seriously. Margaret, who decided she didn't like the frontier life and went back east. Sarah, who married a banker instead. And Victoria, who ran off with a traveling salesman. After Victoria, I'd stopped trying. The frontier wasn't kind to romantic hopes. Mr. Blackwell, Mrs. Patterson said, handing me the letter. This came with a rider from the Morrison family in Boston. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this was about. 5 years ago, I'd made a deal. The kind of deal you make when you're young and stupid and desperate to merge ranches. I'd promised to marry Margaret Morrison, the daughter of a wealthy Boston family, if they'd loan me the money to expand the Blackwell operation during a drought. We'd signed papers, made it official. But then Margaret had backed out, and instead of suing me for breach of contract, which they had every right to do, the Morrisons had proposed something different. They would forgive the debt if I married one of their daughters instead. I'd agreed, thinking they'd send Margaret after all, or perhaps a different daughter who might actually want to come west. I was a fool. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Blackwell, we trust this correspondence finds you in good health. As per our agreement of 5 years prior, we are pleased to inform you that your bride will arrive on the Northern Pacific Railway on June 15th, arriving in Helena at 3:00 p.m. Your bride is Miss Isabel Morrison, our youngest daughter. She is 23 years old, well-educated, and comes from one of Boston's most prominent families. We are confident that this union will satisfy the terms of your contract. Please note, Miss Isabel has certain delicate sensibilities. She has never worked a day in her life. She is unaccustomed to hardship. We trust that you will treat her with the gentleness and respect that a woman of her station deserves. Yours in business, Colonel Edward Morrison." Read the letter 3 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. Isabel Morrison, the youngest. The one everyone in Boston society whispered about. The girl who'd been born with a silver spoon so large she could barely hold it. The girl who'd never done a lick of work in her entire life. The girl who'd been sent west because her family was tired of supporting her. Mrs. Patterson was watching me with sympathy. "June 15th, I said. "Helena, 3:00 p.m. That gives you 3 weeks to prepare." "Prepare for what?" I asked bitterly. "A disaster? An invasion? A woman who's going to take one look at this ranch and demand to go back to Boston on the next train." But I went to Helena anyway, because a deal was a deal, and I was a man of my word. The train platform was crowded with people, miners, ranchers, businessmen, families. I stood at the edge of the crowd watching the passengers disembark, looking for someone who matched the mental picture I'd created. A pale, delicate Eastern woman in an elaborate dress, probably surrounded by servants and trunks. What I saw instead was a young woman in a simple gray traveling dress. No servants, no excessive luggage. Stepping down from the train with a small carpet bag in one hand and a determined expression on her face. She was looking around the platform like she was searching for someone. When her eyes landed on me, she seemed to make a calculation, weighing and measuring, deciding whether I was worth approaching. "Mr. Blackwell," she called out, walking toward me before I could move. Miss Morrison, I said, tipping my hat. This close, Rachel? I could see that she wasn't what I'd expected. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the fragile way I'd imagined. There was something strong in her face, something determined. Her eyes were dark, almost black, Rachel, and they looked at you like they were trying to read your soul. I assume my father explained the situation, she said without preamble. More or less, I replied. Then we should establish some ground rules, Isabel said. Rachel? First, I'm not here because I'm desperate or broken or useless, despite what my family has probably told you. Second, I'm not going to stand around in a pretty dress and pretend to be decorative. Third, Rachel, if this marriage is going to work, we need to be honest with each other from the beginning. I wasn't sure whether to be offended or impressed. Rachel, if you loved this Western romance story about how a useless bride became the richest rancher in Montana, subscribe to the channel and don't miss the next videos. Rachel, we're creating amazing stories about the Old West that will move you. Which country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know if you're following from Brazil, Portugal, Spain, the United States, Rachel, or anywhere else in the world. Click follow to stay updated with everything coming. Important, this is an Old West story set in Montana Territory during the 1870s to 1880s. A modern frontier era facing real challenges. Gender expectations, business struggles, the power of partnership, and how two people can build something extraordinary together. What did you think? Did Isabel make the right choice coming to Montana? Which character did you identify with most? All right, I said. Ground rules established. Shall we get your things? This is all my things, she said, holding up the small carpet bag. I didn't bring much. I figured if this whole arrangement doesn't work out, I didn't want to have too much to haul back to Boston. I looked at that small bag and realized something. Isabel Morrison wasn't here because her family had pushed her. She was here because she'd chosen to come. The ride to the ranch took all day. Isabel sat on the horse beside me, straight-backed and steady, not complaining about the dust or the heat or the hard pace. She asked questions about the ranch, about cattle, about the land, about what needed to be done. How many hands do you have? She asked as we rode. About 20, I said. Good men, most of them. How much debt are you carrying? That made me look at her. That's not really if we're going to be married, and if this ranch is going to be successful, I need to know our financial position, she interrupted. So, how much? $15,000, I admitted, give or take. The ranch operates at a profit, but I'm reinvesting everything back into the operation. Isabel was quiet for a moment, calculating in her head. What would it take to double the herd in the next 5 years? She asked. Money, I said. Good breeding stock, land expansion, a lot of luck. We have the land, she said, and we'll have luck if we work hard enough. But money. She trailed off thinking. We reached the Richest just as the sun was setting. The main house was a solid structure, 2 stories, built from good wood with a wraparound porch and large windows. The barn was massive, painted red. The corrals were well maintained. It was a good ranch, professionally run. Isabel looked at it like she was seeing something I couldn't see. It's beautiful, she said finally, but it's not being used efficiently. Excuse me? The barn is too far from the main house, she said, pointing. During winter, that's a lot of lost time and energy. The corrals should be closer to the water source. You're wasting water hauling it from the creek. And those pastures, she pointed to the grazing fields, you're rotating them wrong. You should be moving cattle more frequently to prevent overgrazing. I stared at her. How do you know anything about ranch management? I grew up in Boston, she said. My father owns mills, textile mills. I learned efficiency and resource management from the time I was 7 years old. Ranching is just a different kind of production system. We were married the next day by a circuit preacher who came through town. The wedding was small. Just us, Mrs. Patterson, and a few of the ranch hands who came to witness it. Isabel wore the same gray traveling dress. I wore my best clothes. We exchanged rings that cost less than a good saddle. But something shifted when that preacher pronounced us man and wife. something real. That night, alone in the house, I tried to figure out what to do with her. "I'd like to see the account books," Isabel said after supper. "And I'd like to talk to the ranch hands. I want to understand how everything operates." "You should rest," I told her. "Travel is exhausting." "I've traveled 3,000 miles, she said. "I can handle looking at some books." "So, I showed her the account books, and her eyes went sharp and calculating as she read through them. She asked questions that showed she understood numbers and percentages and profit margins. She made notes in a small notebook she pulled from her pocket. By midnight, she'd identified 12 different inefficiencies that were costing the ranch money. "We could be making 30% more profit," she said, "if we adjusted our operations. Most of this is just waste. You're not accounting for losses properly. You're not negotiating prices with the suppliers. You're not managing your feed expenses efficiently." "I'm a rancher, not a businessman," I said. "You're both now," she replied. "And if we're going to make this work, if we're going to build something real here, then you need to be willing to listen to ideas." Over the next month, Isabel transformed the ranch. She reorganized the supply chains, negotiated better prices with suppliers in Helena, adjusted the cattle rotation schedule, and redesigned the buildings to improve efficiency. She worked alongside the ranch hands, not in a delicate way, but in a real way. She learned to rope cattle. She learned to judge quality stock. She learned everything about running a ranch by doing the work. And somewhere in the middle of all that work, I fell in love with her. It happened gradually, not in a single moment. It was watching her face as she worked, seeing her solve problems, hearing her laugh when she got thrown from a horse and got right back on. It was listening to her dream about what we could build together. One evening, about 3 months after we'd married, I found her sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and red, and it was the kind of evening that makes you believe in beauty and possibility. "I was wrong about you," I said. "Wrong in what way?" she asked. "I thought you were delicate, that you'd hate it here, that you'd go back to Boston on the first train." "I might have," she said, "if I'd come here to be taken care of, but I came here to build something. There's a difference." "A home," she said, "a real home. Not a Boston mansion or a frontier shack, but something in between. Something in between. Something that's ours." I took her hand and she didn't pull away. 5 years later, the Blackwell ranch was unrecognizable. We'd expanded to 25,000 acres. We'd increased the herd to 20,000 cattle. We'd built the finest breeding operation in Montana Territory. We had contracts with ranches across 3 states, and we were making more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. Not alone. I'd done my part, but the vision, the strategy, the business sense, that was all her. She'd also done something else. She'd become a mother. Our daughter Catherine was born 3 years after we'd married. She had her mother's dark eyes and her mother's determination. A son, Edward, came 2 years later with his mother's intelligence and his father's love of cattle. The other ranchers didn't know what to make of us at first. Impossible, ridiculous, it would never work. But then the money started rolling in. And success, it turns out, is a very persuasive argument. Ranchers started asking Isabel for advice. She started consulting on neighboring ranches, helping them improve their operations, teaching them what she'd taught us. She became known throughout Montana Territory as the woman who could take a struggling ranch and turn it into a profitable operation. One evening, a banker from Helena came to visit the ranch. His name was Mitchell, and he was looking to invest in Montana ranching operations. "I've heard remarkable things about your wife," he said to me as we rode out to view the herds. "They say she's doubled your profits in 5 years." "She has," I admitted. "That's extraordinary," he said. "In my experience, women don't have minds for business." "In my experience," I replied, "most men don't either. She just happens to be smarter than most people, regardless of gender." By the time Mitchell left, he'd invested $20,000 in a new venture with us, a breeding operation focused on producing the finest cattle in the West. That investment pushed us into a new level of success. Within 10 years of our marriage, the Blackwell Ranch was generating over $100,000 a year in profit. We had the finest horses, the best cattle, and a reputation for excellence that stretched from Montana to California. But more than that, we had something that was harder to quantify: a partnership. Isabel and I complemented each other perfectly. Where I was strong with animals and land management, she was brilliant with strategy and numbers. Where she was all logic and calculation, I provided intuition and experience. We didn't always agree, but we always listened to each other, and we loved each other. That came later than the respect and the partnership. But when it came, it was deep and abiding. I'm 60 years old now, and Isabel is 38. We've been married for 15 years, and the Blackwell Ranch is the most successful operation in Montana Territory. We've been written about in newspapers. We've been asked to advise the territorial government on agricultural policy. We're wealthy, genuinely wealthy, in a way that extends beyond just the ranch to investments, land holdings, and business interests across the West. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't the money or the success or the reputation. It's that Isabel looks at me the same way she did that first day in Helena. Like she's assessing whether I'm worth believing in. And every day, I try to prove that I am. And she's inherited her mother's business sense and her father's love of the land. Edward is 10, and he's developing his own path. Part businessman like his mother, part rancher like his father. We don't have servants, or rather we do, but not many. Isabel still works the ranch alongside me. She still wakes before dawn to review supply orders. She still spends her afternoons working with the breeding stock. She's never stopped working. "Don't you ever get tired?" I asked her once. "Of what?" she replied. "Of building something, of creating something from nothing, of proving that women can do more than just look pretty and produce heirs." "All of it," I said. "No," she said simply, "not if it matters, and this matters." The day that changed everything for us came unexpectedly, like most important days do. We were riding out to check on the north pasture when a rider approached from the south. A young man on a tired horse, covered in dust, looking desperate. "Are you Thomas Blackwell?" he asked. "I am," I said. "My name is Samuel Price," the young man said. "I'm from Kansas. I own a small ranch there, and I'm struggling. Bad drought, poor cattle, mounting debts. I heard about what you've done here, about how you turned this into the most successful operation in the territory." I was wondering if he trailed off like he was afraid of the answer. Isabel leaned forward slightly. "If what?" she asked. "If you might be willing to advise me." Samuel said, "I know I'm nobody. I know you don't owe me anything, but I heard you help people, that you teach them how to make their ranches work." I looked at Isabel, and I could see her making a decision. "We'll help you," she said. "But you have to be willing to work, and you have to be willing to listen to advice that might not match what you've always done." "I will," Samuel said immediately. "I'll do whatever it takes." We spent the next 3 months mentoring Samuel. Isabel redesigned his entire operation. I helped him source better breeding stock. But together, we showed him how to turn his struggling ranch into something viable. When he left to go back to Kansas, he was crying. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Build something good," Isabel said. "And when someone else comes to you struggling, help them the same way we helped you. That's how you repay kindness, by passing it forward." After he left, I asked Isabel why we'd spent so much time on something that wasn't going to directly benefit us. "Because we can," she said simply. "We have the knowledge and the resources to help someone else avoid the struggles we had. And because somewhere in Boston, someone helped my father's company when times were hard. That's how the world works. People help each other, and everyone's better for it." They called us the richest ranch in Montana. The newspapers wrote about us. The territorial government asked for our advice. Other ranchers came to study our methods, but when people asked me how it all happened, how I went from managing an operation that was barely profitable to creating something extraordinary, I always told them the same thing. I married the right woman. And when they asked Isabel how she did it, how she went from a useless Eastern girl to becoming the most successful ranch manager in the territory, she always said, "I married a man willing to listen." That was the key. He could have dismissed me as a woman with no frontier experience, but he was willing to listen. And more than that, he was willing to follow my advice, even when it went against everything he'd been taught. Catherine became a businesswoman in her own right, managing investments and business operations, while her brother Edward ran the cattle operations. The family legacy expanded across Montana and beyond. But the real legacy, I think, is what Isabel and I built together. Not just a successful ranch, but a partnership that showed what was possible when two people with different strengths worked toward a common goal. She was never the useless bride her family had sent to ruin my ranch. She was exactly what I needed, even though I didn't know it at the time. And I was exactly what she needed. Someone willing to believe in her when the entire world told her she was incapable of doing anything useful. That's what I tell young people now when they ask about success. It's not just about hard work, though hard work matters. It's not just about intelligence, though intelligence helps. It's about finding someone who complements your weaknesses, who challenges you to be better, who believes in you when you're struggling. It's about partnership. And it all started because a desperate rancher in Montana Territory was willing to marry the youngest Morrison daughter, expecting to be ruined. Instead, he was saved. That's a better love story than any fairy tale.